Yeah, it's one of those things. It's easy, everyone, in hindsight now, to jump on and put the boot into Lance and he's down. And I mean, I've read the Tyler book and I've read the books and I've read the reports, and you know, I'd say this: hate the game, don't hate the player. He was doing what it seemed everybody else was doing. So, and maybe the problem was that he came to triathlon, which was a different culture and a different sport. And not to say we're clean. I mean, there's been a couple of positive drug tests in the sport this year, and it's an inevitable part of sport and human nature. People, you know, I mean, I found it interesting too with Lance. Everyone was piling on him, and you know, reading some of the stuff on Twitter was amazing to me because, you know, doping is no different to me than drafting or cutting the course. You know.
Looking back on your career, give me like the one moment that you remember for the rest of your life, or is there one?
It's hard to pick one. One race that it was really a big thrill to win was the Lifetime Fitness race in 2005. For obvious reasons, you know. At the time, it was the highest paying race in the history of the sport, the highest prize purse. Just the prestige. It was an invitation-only race. They invited 20 men and 20 women who they thought were the best 20 in the world. And you know, it was 2005. It was a post-Olympic year, and obviously, I ventured away from the Olympic style of racing in 2002. But I got to race a lot of the guys who had success, and I mean, that day I beat both the Olympic champions, Hamish Carter and Simon Whitfield, two good mates of mine, and in my opinion, two of the greatest triathletes ever. Bevan Doherty, another one, who's one of the best ever, and it was just an unbelievable field. It was a collection of the ITU guys, the non-drafting guys, some of the long course guys, and so I think, you know, not getting to race those guys as often. Obviously, you know, I'd won Chicago by then and LA and the US Pro Champs, but I didn't get to race a lot of the guys who I'd raced early in my career because they were going down the Olympic path. So to win that race against that quality of field and those guys meant a lot to me in terms of validating my career in a big race that everybody was trying to win. And particularly, you know, at that time, you know, our daughter was only 8 weeks old, Lucy, so emotionally, it was just, we were on a high from that as well. You know, my wife and I were walking on clouds probably for that whole year. But and then financially, you know, triathlon's not the PGA Golf Tour, so to win a race like that with a $200,000 payday.
And a car, I think, right? There's a car.
And the car, Toyota. Yeah, Toyota sponsored the event, so it was huge, particularly with the Aussie dollar where it was back then too. We nearly doubled our money when we sent it home, but the good old those days are long gone now. But yeah, just for a lot of reasons, like that race stands out in my mind. I mean, I just remember that year so clearly, the birth of our first child. And
all right, give me the flip side of the coin. What's the toughest race that you raced?
It's a good question. Kona this year was tough.
Yeah, you looked spent at the end of it. You looked really spent.
I obviously physically wasn't where I needed to be, and it was a mental battle just to push on and finish.
And I think a lot of people appreciate the fact that a lot of people appreciate that you kept going, because a lot of athletes won't. They'll, you know, you're not having a good day. There's no upside to it, really, right?
Well, there's no upside to it other than it challenges you on a different level. And like I said before, it's easy to win when things are going good.
Yeah.
Who can't do that? I don't mean to be rude, but who can't do that when you're having a great day? It's, you know, and it was a different experience because all 4 or 5 of my previous Konas had been relatively good to some degree, you know. So the last 5 hours of that race were probably the most painful that I've ever experienced out there. And, but it was easy to keep going because, you know, it's not just me out there. It would have been hard to step off the course and disappoint, you know, my wife and kids and all the sponsors who have supported me all year. You know, I wasn't going to take an easy option. This sport, I do it to challenge me, and I was being challenged in a different way. So I felt that I had to finish, and you know, it was easy to keep going to honour the support that I'd had all year. You know, my brother, he gets 2 or 3 weeks holiday a year. He took, you know, 10 days off and flew his family over to watch the race from Australia, and my mum had come over and some of my wife's family, so...
A lot riding on your shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, those people that uplift you in spirit when you're doing well, but they also help you get through the hard times when it's hard as well. I don't see having all that support as a burden. I've always seen it as a massive advantage, and everybody was disappointed, but that's sport. You don't win all the time. In fact, you learn more about the sport and yourself when it is hard like that. So.
All right, last two questions. What's your best race day tip for somebody who's getting into the sport and who's a age group athlete? Have
fun, enjoy it, and don't change anything. Do what you've done in training, what's worked for you in training and your big sessions, your benchmark sessions in training. Just go out and execute again the same way you have in those sessions. Don't change your diet. That's not just race day, race week. Keep everything. Don't change equipment.
Do nothing new.
Nothing new.
All right, two more questions I got to ask. First of all, Chrissy obviously announced that she's retiring. What are your thoughts on that?
Mixed emotions. Sad that we won't have her in our sport anymore for obvious reasons. Just.
Yeah, you guys were kind of compatriots at the Kona level, at least.
Yeah, she is an amazing athlete. I don't need to sit here and talk about her resume, but she raised the bar. Every now and again, an athlete comes along that changes the landscape within the sport. She did it for the girls, and was fun at the races. Was fun at the press conferences. Living here in Boulder, I used to see her daily on the pool deck, always smiling. So I'm sad that we've lost that aspect, but happy for her. She's made a decision that makes her happy, and she always had her social conscience and things that she was doing. Triathlon was never her whole life. She had other things that she was interested in. I'm happy that she gets to pursue those things now. So yeah, happy for her. Sad for the triathlon community, but happy for her. So.
And of course the other big story is Lance Armstrong and the whole mess with him. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because Lance coming into the sport was probably the best thing that ever happened to the sport. I mean, it took our sport, it was to another audience completely, and could have been the platform that launched us to another level. So, and really, he's the reason I decided to do Kona this year, because I'd always said to my wife, I'm only going to race in Kona 5 times, and last year was the 5th time, and I'd won, became the oldest to win, broke the record. It was kind of a nice, way to go out, but I felt, I'd heard whispers Lance was going to do Kona, and I thought that would be something very special to be a part of. So obviously what's transpired since then, it wasn't to be. And it's one of those things, it's easy, everyone in hindsight now, to jump on and put the boot into Lance and he's down. And I mean, I've read the Tyler book and I've read the books and I've read the reports, and I'd say this: hate the game, don't hate the player. He was doing what it seemed everybody else was doing. So, and maybe the problem was that he came to triathlon, which was a different culture and a different sport. And not to say we're clean. I mean, there's been a couple of positive drug tests in the sport this year, and it's an inevitable part of sport and human nature. People, I mean, but I found it interesting too with Lance. Everyone was piling on him, and reading some of the stuff on Twitter was amazing to me because, doping is no different to me than drafting or cutting the course. But
it's another form of cheating.
Yeah, and people, guys I race who draft all the time and who do the wrong thing, putting the slipper right into him. I'm thinking, you can't.
Well, hypocritical.
I thought so. Yeah. And it's easy, when a guy's down and everyone's piling on to join the bandwagon. I just think the whole thing's sad. It's just another episode where we've had our heart broken, like Marion Jones. But you can never judge a person. You can't judge a person until you've walked in their shoes. And I mean, from what I understand and what I've read, that was the culture within the sport. There was doping in cycling long before Lance Armstrong came along.
It goes way back to the start of the sport.
Way back to the start of the sport.
And
so
it's been an integral part of it the whole time.
An integral part. It was a cultural thing within the sport, and I mean.
And you had that talk, right? You either jump on the bandwagon or you're at the back of the train.
And like I said, I'm not going to condone what they did, but from what you read and stuff, a lot of these guys start out not wanting to do that. They have stars in their eyes and want to go to Europe to ride the Tour de France, and they leave from high school, they go into full-time training, and 6 or 7 years later, 23, 24 years of age, you get good enough to get on a pro tour team, and you find out that that's the way it is. I mean,
and you've got a choice.
Well, you've done no education. You've devoted your whole life to this. I mean, it's a tough choice, and I know it's still a choice. But it's easy to judge what you would do from the outside. I think it's a different thing to be sitting there and having that conversation, and be sitting in their shoes and have to make that decision when you've basically thrown away any chance of any other career, I mean, then what do you do? I mean, once again, I'm not trying to condone what they did. I'm all for stamping doping out. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we saw for a brief moment what Lance would have brought to our sport. You know, some athletes transcend sport because of their story and what they've done and what they've accomplished, and he's one of those guys. So it certainly would have been amazing Kona this year. I mean, everybody was going to be watching Ironman France this year.
I know. It would have been a media circus.
Yeah, so that aspect of it, I'm kind of sad we don't get to see our sport taken to another level, and you need that. You need it. Something has to be a catalyst to elevate a sport, and he was going to be the catalyst, maybe to take triathlon to the mainstream audience, and but it didn't work out. So I mean, the situation is just sad all round.
You got to do it.
Wow.
What's your next race?
Next race, obviously planning next season right now. I always like to do the big races. I like to race the best people, and my sponsors obviously like that too, because the biggest races are the ones that have the most media, so I think that goes hand in hand. And at this point in my career, I'm not about doing 15 or 20 races in a year like I used to do. I think I like to pick the big ones. I don't like to travel as much because of the young family. So I think from an Ironman standpoint, I'm looking at either Melbourne or Frankfurt. I definitely want to go back to Vegas next year and have another crack at that title. I mean, that's my favourite distance, 70.3. So I think I'm going to do Utah, the 70.3 Pro Champs, the new race in Utah this year. They've changed it from an Ironman to a half. I've heard it's a very challenging course, so that one I want to put on the schedule. And I want to go to Europe as well for a few weeks. Mate, I saw there was a new 70.3 race announced in Berlin.
That'd be fun.
I think it'd be fun.
Have a great marathon.
Yeah, and it's a similar sort of theme. They're going to race it around the downtown, around some iconic landmarks. I think that would be.
And the Germans love. I mean, they're
fanatical supporters of endurance sport. I think the Rayleigh boys would race, and Sebastian would race, and maybe Faris. So I think it would be a very competitive race, beautiful race to do. So, and maybe the ITU World Long Course Champs as well. It's that 4K 120. 30 distances. I've only done it once and I loved it. I wish there were more races. Obviously the old classic Nice race used to be that race, and I know Mark and those guys, Luke Van Leed, used to go and race there and they loved it. So maybe that race, but definitely go to Europe for a couple of weeks, a couple of races as well.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah.